Princess Anne did not whisper the decision behind palace doors. She delivered it where the entire royal establishment could hear. With Meghan's name still printed on preliminary guest lists, the Princess Royal calmly announced that the Duchess would no longer be invited to official or private royal family events. The room froze. Charles lowered his eyes. William remained motionless, and thousands of miles away, Meghan received the message that she had been erased from the family's future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne stood at a televised reception inside St. James's Palace that day. The Princess Royal, the monarch's sister, known for carrying out demanding public duties, confirmed that Meghan would be excluded from state ceremonies, memorial services, Christmas gatherings, weddings, baptisms, and official balcony appearances. These occasions were more than social invitations. They defined who still belonged in the royal family and who remained outside its future. Meghan sat at home with a provisional invitation for an upcoming memorial. She read Anne's words twice, pushed the card away, and asked Harry why nobody had warned them. He reached for his phone, furious that his aunt had spoken before Charles contacted him. She stopped him. The lost events hurt, but the deeper wound was sharper. The family had declared that she was no longer trusted inside its private circle. Harry called palace numbers anyway. He demanded Charles, then William, then anyone to explain how a family dispute had become a public sentence. Meghan watched his anger rise, but heard fear beneath it. Exclusion from weddings and memorials meant their children could grow separated from moments that shape family memory. Every future absence would become proof that reconciliation had failed. Anne offered no apology. She called the decision protection, not punishment, declaring that royal gatherings could no longer become stages for private disputes, media campaigns, or competing versions of palace history. Then came the line that changed everything. This follows repeated breaches of private family trust. The statement came through a documented palace briefing, so every word had been reviewed before she spoke. William knew the announcement was coming, but Charles did not expect it so openly. The king gripped the edge of a table as his sister finished, realizing she had turned a private crisis into an irreversible decree. When Harry finally reached Anne, she refused to discuss it by telephone. Her answer was cold. "Speak to your brother first." But before Harry could confront William, Meghan demanded to know which members of the family had stood beside Anne and which ones had silently allowed her exclusion to happen. The announcement sounded like one woman's decision, but it carried the silence of an entire dynasty. Behind Anne stood years of fractured loyalties, private disappointments, and conversations that had ended with doors closing instead of wounds healing. Meghan saw a deliberate humiliation. Harry saw abandonment by blood. William saw a boundary that should have been drawn years earlier. Charles saw the family he had failed to reunite, and the consequences of allowing hope to survive beyond its final chance. Harry sat alone after the failed calls, holding an old photograph of himself beside Anne at a family gathering. The aunt who had once laughed with him now believed every invitation involving him carried the risk of fresh turmoil. His anger slowly collapsed into sadness. Losing access to royal events meant more than missing ceremonies. It meant losing birthdays, memorials, Christmas mornings, and the shared moments that keep family history alive. Meghan watched him struggle, but her own fear ran deeper. Exclusion removed any formal route back into royal life, and could leave their children outside the gatherings that linked them to their grandfather, cousins, and heritage. She told Harry that attending without her would allow the palace to divide their marriage. He could not answer. Refusing every invitation might protect his wife, but it could also mean abandoning Charles, William, and the world that shaped him. Anne carried a different wound. She believed royal occasions were sacred spaces of duty and continuity, meaning they preserved the family's public role across generations. In her eyes, years of conflict had repeatedly dragged attention away from the monarch, grieving relatives, and the purpose of each gathering. She no longer trusted hope without boundaries. Sophie finally broke the silence during a recorded private conversation with Edward. The trusted confidant admitted that Anne had not acted alone. A small group of senior royals had been asked whether family occasions could continue under the existing arrangement, and not one offered Meghan unconditional support. Edward listened without interrupting, understanding that the silence itself had become a verdict. Catherine's name changed the mood completely. She had originally resisted a total exclusion, arguing that one final controlled path should remain open. Yet something happened during a private memorial planning meeting that reversed her position. The princess left that conversation convinced reconciliation could not survive without a firm line. Meghan seized on the reversal. She told Harry to discover exactly what Catherine had witnessed, because that moment, not Anne's speech, held the real reason the family had united against her. The answer led back to one private gathering, one unfinished conversation, and the moment the palace later described as the final breach of trust. The decision did not begin at St. James's Palace. It began 6 weeks earlier inside a quiet Windsor sitting room, where a small group had gathered to plan a memorial honoring Queen Elizabeth. There were no cameras, no public statements, and no expectation of confrontation. Yet before the meeting ended, Catherine had left visibly shaken, William had ordered the room cleared, and Anne had placed a handwritten note inside her folder. That note would become the foundation of Meghan's permanent exclusion. Catherine entered the discussion, determined to prevent another family fracture. The memorial, a private service created to honor the late Queen on a meaningful anniversary, was supposed to unite relatives through grief rather than rank. She argued that Harry and Meghan should receive a limited invitation. Anne agreed to consider it, but only if every seating plan and private exchange remained confidential. Meghan joined through a video call and immediately challenged the proposed arrangement. She had been offered a place away from senior working royals, meaning family members who officially represent the monarch at public engagements. To her, the separation was not protection. It was a public signal that she could attend only as an outsider. Catherine tried to calm the tension. She explained that the service was about Queen Elizabeth, not titles, status, or old disputes. Meghan refused to accept that distinction. She told the princess that silence from royal women had allowed years of mistreatment to continue, and that another carefully managed seat would only disguise the same rejection. William watched his wife's hands begin to tremble as the call ended. The prince moved her chair away from the table, asked the others to leave, and remained beside her while she struggled to understand how an offer of peace had become another accusation. Anne said nothing. She simply wrote down the final wording used during the discussion and placed the note inside her folder. The real rupture came the following morning. An entertainment briefing repeated confidential details about the proposed seating, including the exact phrase, "family presence without institutional recognition." That language mattered because it had been spoken only inside the Windsor meeting. Its appearance outside the room proved that someone with access had carried the discussion beyond the family. Anne compared the published account with her handwritten note. She circled the matching phrase, closed the folder, and told William that controlled invitations were no longer possible. Meghan later denied authorizing any disclosure, but the Princess Royal decided intent no longer changed the damage. She prepared to confront Harry directly. He would now have to choose between defending the leak and protecting what remained of his relationship with the family. When Harry entered Windsor expecting negotiation, he instead found Anne waiting alone, with the leaked words placed between them like evidence at a trial. Harry expected anger. He did not expect finality. Anne waited without advisors, without Charles, and without the protection of palace formality. On the table rested 2 pages, her handwritten notes, and the published briefing that repeated them almost word for word. She did not ask whether Meghan had leaked the information. She asked whether Harry still understood the meaning of family privacy. His answer would determine whether there was anything left to negotiate, or whether the door had already closed. Anne opened with no softness. The Princess Royal, the monarch's sister, trusted to defend family discipline, said the crown had endured interviews, memoirs, criticism, and accusations. But a private memorial was different. It belonged to grief, not strategy, and every breach turned remembrance into another battlefield. Harry rejected the accusation. He insisted that neither he nor Meghan had personally given the Windsor details to the media. Information passed through advisors, friends, staff, and palace offices, he argued, making certainty impossible. Punishing his wife without proof was not protection. It was judgment disguised as duty. Anne leaned forward. She told him every crisis ended with the same defense. No direct instruction, no personal responsibility, no accountability for the result. Harry's face hardened. He accused her of deciding Meghan's guilt before he entered, and using privacy as a weapon against a woman the family had never accepted. The room tightened. Harry said excluding his wife meant excluding him. Anne did not raise her voice. That choice belongs to you, but the boundary belongs to us. Then she slid the proposed event list away from his side of the table, ending the illusion that this was still a negotiation. Anne revealed her evidence through a documented chronology prepared for Charles and William. 3 earlier private arrangements involving Meghan had produced near-identical leaks, each repeating language known only to a restricted circle. The pattern mattered because one incident could be dismissed as coincidence. 4 made trust impossible. Harry searched the pages and suddenly saw Catherine's initials beside the final recommendation. That shook him more than William's support. The princess had once defended a controlled path back into family occasions, yet now she had signed the line closing it. Anne watched him absorb the blow, then delivered the final limit. The exclusion could not become official until the sovereign accepted the family protocol, a written set of rules governing future invitations. Charles still held the pen. Charles had not yet signed. For Harry, that unsigned page became the final doorway still open. Harry left believing his father might still reverse the decision, but Charles was already facing a choice between protecting his son's last hope and protecting the monarchy from another cycle of turmoil. Charles had spent years searching for a compromise that would preserve both the crown and his son. Now a single page forced him to admit that compromise had failed. The protocol did not remove titles, alter succession, or erase blood ties. It did something more intimate. It gave senior family members authority to hold royal gatherings without extending invitations to Meghan. As the king read Anne's recommendation, his hand remained above the signature line, and the room waited for a father to surrender to duty. Charles studied the list in silence. The family protocol, a written set of rules controlling invitations to private royal occasions, separated personal gatherings from public state responsibilities. Meghan would be absent from memorials, palace receptions, Christmas celebrations, official family ceremonies, and collective appearances unless the monarch personally approved an exception. That mattered because exclusion would no longer depend on mood or negotiation. It would become the family's standing position. Anne remained firm beside him. Her influence did not come from constitutional power, but from decades of protecting private traditions, organizing difficult occasions, and earning the trust of working royals across generations. She had become the person others relied upon when affection made clear decisions almost impossible. Charles reached the word Christmas and stopped. He remembered Harry racing through Sandringham corridors as a boy, laughing before the weight of royal life had hardened everything around him. The king lowered his pen and asked whether a father should formalize an empty chair at every gathering still to come. William answered with painful control. The empty chair already existed, he said. The document simply ended the pretense that another invitation could repair damage that repeated breaches had deepened. The prince kept his voice steady, yet Charles heard grief beneath every word. William was not celebrating victory, he was accepting loss. Catherine then explained her support through a documented account attached to the recommendation. Private remarks she had made during the Windsor call had reached people outside the family. Her fear was not embarrassment. She feared that every future gesture of kindness could be turned into fresh conflict, making trust dangerous for everyone involved. Charles finally lifted the pen, but he added one amendment before signing. Harry would retain the right to attend selected events alone. The clause exposed the monarch's last attempt to protect his bond with his son, while accepting the family's refusal to include Meghan. The signature landed softly. Its consequences did not. News of the solitary invitation clause reached Harry and Meghan before the full protocol arrived, forcing him toward the choice she had feared from the beginning. As the first invitations arrived bearing only Harry's name, the exclusion stopped being a palace threat and became a reality inside his marriage. The envelope was small, formal, and devastating. It invited Harry to attend a service honoring his grandmother, but the line where Meghan's name should have appeared remained blank. There was no insult, no explanation, and no visible anger, only absence made official. She held the card by its edges, reading the solitary name as though it were a verdict on their marriage. Harry watched her expression change and understood that Anne's decision had finally entered their home. Meghan placed the invitation on the kitchen counter and asked whether Harry intended to go. The memorial service, a private ceremony created to honor a deceased family member, would be the first gathering controlled by the new protocol. He had been invited as Charles's son. She had been deliberately omitted under the clause allowing him to attend alone. Harry said he needed time. Meghan heard hesitation, not caution. She walked away without touching the envelope again, because the blank space beside his name carried two painful meanings. The palace no longer recognized her place within the family, and her husband was still being offered a path back without her. Palace staff repeated one approved sentence when questions began. Attendance reflected the private wishes of the family. The wording mattered because it left no room for bargaining, blame, or accidental hope. Anne's announcement was no longer a warning, it was being enforced. Harry called Charles, searching for reassurance. The king listened, then admitted he could not promise Meghan would be welcomed while trust remained broken. His son ended the call before either man said goodbye. Charles remained silent on the line, while Harry sat alone with his head in his hands. William sent a second communication through a documented private message. The prince offered his brother a discreet entrance, private seating, and time alone with their father after the service. The offer proved the family still wanted Harry present. It also confirmed that every gesture of compassion now depended on Meghan remaining outside. Meghan discovered the message and accused the palace of dividing them through carefully staged kindness. Harry answered that rejecting every gesture would prove Anne's claim that no solution could survive. Their argument rose until she asked the question neither could escape. "Do you want your family back badly enough to leave me outside?" Anne had expected resistance, but even she understood that the invitation would force Harry to choose between inherited loyalty and marital solidarity forever. Harry could not answer, but before dawn, he made a decision that shifted the entire conflict. Instead of accepting the invitation or destroying it, Harry requested one final private meeting with Meghan, without lawyers, advisors, palace officials, or anyone else, to absorb the truth. For once, there was no institution between them, no palace statement, no press team, no family representative translating anger into careful language. Harry and Meghan sat across from each other with the invitation lying unopened between them. What began as an argument over one memorial became a reckoning with everything they had lost, everything they had protected, and everything they might never recover. By sunrise, one of them would make a concession, and the other would finally understand its cost. Harry spoke first. Attending the memorial, he said, would not mean accepting Anne's exclusion or surrendering his wife to palace judgment. The service, a private ceremony created to honor someone who has died, offered him one chance to remember his grandmother, speak to Charles, and enter a royal space without allowing the day to become another public battle. Meghan listened, but humiliation sat beneath every word. She told him the family was punishing her in public while offering him affection in private, turning her absence into the price of his return. That mattered, because every invitation bearing only his name suggested their marriage could be divided into acceptable and unacceptable halves. Harry finally admitted what anger had hidden. He missed his father. He missed William. He was tired of pretending that childhood bonds could be replaced, because the old world had hurt him. His voice broke when he said loving Meghan should never have required erasing everyone who had known him before their marriage. Meghan turned away at first. Then she removed the memorial invitation from its envelope and placed it before him. She told Harry to attend, not for Anne, not for William, and not for palace approval, but for the queen he still mourned. Her choice was not surrender, it was quiet resolve. Meghan added one condition. Harry must not plead for her invitation or publicly attack the exclusion during the service. She understood that forcing immediate restoration would only harden the family's resistance, and make her dignity depend on another refusal. Harry promised he would return afterward. He would not let the palace describe his attendance as separation from his wife, and she would not treat his grief as betrayal. Their agreement did not repair the royal fracture, but it ended the struggle inside their home. Anne learned of the decision through a documented private message from Harry. For the first time, her expression softened. Yet the public still knew nothing of the agreement, and the memorial mourning was about to turn one compromise into a worldwide spectacle. As Harry entered the chapel alone, one empty space beside him became the image through which the world judged Meghan, Anne, and the future of the royal family. The public did not need a palace statement to understand what had happened. Harry walked into St. George's Chapel alone, paused for a fraction of a second beside the row reserved for family, and took his seat without Meghan. That single movement became the defining image of the mourning. Supporters called it cruelty, critics called it consequence. But inside the chapel, Anne watched him lower his head, knowing the world was witnessing a boundary the family had once been too afraid to draw. Broadcasters seized on the moment immediately. St. George's Chapel, a royal church at Windsor used for weddings, funerals, and family services, became the stage for the first visible enforcement of Meghan's exclusion. Cameras showed Harry seated between distant relatives, rather than beside his wife, and commentary shifted from speculation to certainty. This mattered because absence was no longer hidden inside private guest lists. It had become public proof of the new family order. The palace answered through a documented press statement. Guest arrangements, it said, reflected a private family protocol approved by Charles. The protocol was simply a written set of rules governing invitations. Officials refused to discuss the confidential incidents behind it, allowing Anne's original announcement to stand without explanation or retreat. Harry remained composed until a hymn linked to Queen Elizabeth began. He closed his eyes and gripped the service sheet. William noticed from across the aisle, but the prince did not move toward him. That distance carried its own pain. The brothers shared grief, blood, and memory, yet still could not cross the space between them. For Harry, the contrast was brutal. Public acceptance as a prince, private rejection of his wife, and no way to separate them. Meghan watched the broadcast from home. When the camera lingered on the empty place beside Harry, she switched off the television. Anger would have been easier. Instead, she felt the decision harden into permanence. Anne's words had wounded her, but that empty seat made the exclusion feel undeniable. The next morning, one newspaper captured the division with a front-page photograph of Harry entering alone beneath the headline, "One prince, one empty seat, one family line." Outside Windsor Castle, supporters of Anne held signs defending royal privacy, while others placed white flowers with notes calling for reconciliation. Anne approached Harry after the service. She did not apologize, and he did not ask her to. The princess simply said, "You came for her. I respect that." In 6 words, she recognized his grief without reversing the boundary. Those words did not restore Meghan's place, but they allowed Harry to leave Windsor without humiliation, and prepared the family for a final verdict no announcement alone could deliver. In the end, Meghan was not defeated by one speech, one invitation, or one empty chair. She was confronted by a boundary the royal family had finally agreed to enforce together. Anne's announcement ended years of uncertainty, but it also exposed the human cost of that clarity. Harry remained a son, a brother, and a prince by birth. Meghan remained his wife and the mother of his children. Yet the institution and the family had decided those truths no longer guaranteed her return. The decision now stood as permanent policy. Meghan would remain outside official family ceremonies, private gatherings, memorials, and collective appearances unless a future sovereign personally overturned the arrangement. A sovereign is the reigning monarch with final authority over such family decisions. That permanence mattered because it ended the repeated cycle of invitations, refusals, leaks, and public disputes that had kept every gathering trapped beneath the same shadow. Anne accepted responsibility through a documented private account delivered to Charles and William. She believed quiet warnings had failed too many times, and that continued uncertainty had become cruel to everyone involved. The princess knew her decision would be called severe, But she also knew that endless ambiguity had damaged Catherine, Harry, Meghan, and the king, while turning moments of grief into fresh battles. Harry returned home carrying no victory. He told Meghan that nobody had mocked her absence, and no relative had pressured him to leave her. She listened quietly, realizing the family was not trying to destroy their marriage. It was protecting its own spaces from another cycle of conflict. Meghan admitted she had expected his solitary attendance to feel like betrayal. Instead, Harry's return proved that he could acknowledge his royal past without abandoning their shared life. He then repeated Anne's 6 words, "You came for her, I respect that." The princess had offered no reversal, only recognition. Charles later sent his son a private written message. The king affirmed that Harry would always remain family, but he would no longer ask others to reopen a decision they considered settled. That message closed the final path to immediate reconciliation. Meghan finally accepted that dignity sometimes meant stepping away from doors that would not reopen. Anne protected the family by drawing a line. Harry protected his marriage without erasing his grief. The monarchy stopped confusing forgiveness with unlimited access. Princess Anne's announcement did not reunite the royal family, but it gave every person within it a defined place. And in a dynasty damaged by years of blurred loyalties, that painful clarity became the only resolution still possible. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.